Hello, beautiful soul. I'm Aurora, and welcome to Twin Flame Journey, a space where we explore the deeper meaning behind soul connections, divine timing, and the path that leads two hearts back to union. If you've been feeling the signs, you're in the right place.
Have you ever met someone and afterward, nothing in your life felt the same again? Not just emotionally, not just romantically, but fundamentally, as if something deep inside your soul had been switched on. Maybe before meeting them, your life was relatively normal. You had routines, plans, and a clear idea of what success looked like. You woke up, went to work, spent time with friends, and followed the path that most people follow. There may have been moments of curiosity about life's deeper meaning, but those thoughts usually faded quickly as everyday responsibilities took over. Then one day you met them. At first, the encounter might have seemed ordinary. Maybe you met through work, through friends, online, or even by complete coincidence. But something about the moment felt different, almost impossible to explain. There was a strange familiarity. You might have felt like you already knew them, even though you had just met. Some people describe this moment as a feeling of recognition rather than introduction. It's as if your soul quietly whispers, "I know this person." And from that moment forward, something inside you begins to change. This is what many people in spiritual communities refer to as twin flame activation. But here's the surprising truth. The activation doesn't usually feel like a magical fairy tale. In fact, for many people, it begins with confusion, the unexplainable pull. One of the first things people notice after meeting their twin flame is an intense and almost mysterious pull toward the other person. It's not always about physical attraction. It's deeper than that. You might find yourself thinking about them constantly, even when you try not to. Their presence seems to linger in your mind long after the interaction ends. You replay conversations. You analyze every moment. You wonder why this person feels so important. And sometimes the connection doesn't even make logical sense. Maybe your lives are completely different. Maybe the timing is wrong. Maybe one of you is already in another relationship. Or maybe the connection is so intense that it scares one or both of you. Yet despite all the reasons it shouldn't work, the energy between you feels undeniable. You may start asking yourself questions like, why does this person affect me so deeply? Why do I feel like my life somehow revolves around them now? Why do I feel like meeting them was not an accident? These questions often mark the very beginning of the activation process, when your inner world starts shifting. After the encounter, many people notice subtle but powerful shifts happening within them. At first, the changes might be small. You may begin reflecting on your life more deeply than before. Questions that never seemed important suddenly feel urgent. Questions like, am I really happy with the life I'm living? Is this career truly what I'm meant to do? Why do I feel like something inside me is waking up? It can feel as if your inner world is slowly rearranging itself. Things that once felt stable begin to feel uncertain. Things that once felt meaningful begin to lose their importance. And things you never cared about before, like spirituality, purpose, and personal growth, start to capture your attention. This is not a coincidence. Many people report that meeting their twin flame acts like a catalyst, triggering deep inner transformation. It's almost like meeting them flips a hidden switch inside your consciousness. Suddenly, you begin seeing your life from a completely different perspective. The strange sense of destiny. Another common experience during this stage is a powerful feeling that the meeting was somehow meant to happen. Even if you try to dismiss the idea, the thought keeps returning. You may look back at the events that led to your meeting and realize how unlikely they were. Maybe your paths crossed because of a last-minute decision. Maybe you almost didn't go to the place where you met. Maybe several unexpected coincidences lined up perfectly. When you reflect on it, the whole situation begins to feel strangely orchestrated. People often describe this stage by saying things like, it felt like the universe arranged it. It felt like destiny. Of course, your logical mind might resist that idea. But the feeling is difficult to ignore. Because deep down, something inside you knows. This meeting was not random. Emotional intensity you've never felt before. Another reason twin flame activation feels so powerful is the emotional intensity that comes with
It.
This connection often triggers emotions far stronger than typical relationships. You may feel excitement, joy, and inspiration unlike anything you've experienced before. But at the same time, the connection can also bring fear, vulnerability, and emotional exposure.
Why?
Because twin flame connections often act like mirrors. They reflect parts of yourself that you might not usually see. Your strengths, your insecurities, your wounds, your deepest desires. When someone mirrors your inner world this clearly, it can feel both beautiful and overwhelming. You might feel understood in ways you never have before. Yet at the same time, you might feel exposed, like this person can see through every layer of your personality. For some people, this level of emotional intensity becomes so overwhelming that they instinctively pull away. This is where the famous runner and chaser dynamic often begins. But that part of the journey comes later. Right now, the most important thing to understand is this. The moment you meet your twin flame, something inside you begins to wake up. Why this moment is called activation. The word activation is used because the encounter seems to awaken dormant aspects of the soul. Before the meeting, many people live on what could be described as autopilot. They follow societal expectations. They pursue goals defined by external standards. They rarely question the deeper meaning behind their choices. But after twin flame activation, that autopilot mode begins to break down. Suddenly, you become more aware, more reflective, more sensitive to energy and emotions. You might start noticing patterns in your life that you never recognized before. You might begin questioning beliefs you once accepted without thinking. And you might feel an inner urge to discover who you truly are beyond roles, labels, and expectations. In other words, your consciousness begins expanding. And while this awakening can be exciting, it can also feel unsettling. Because growth often requires letting go of the familiar, the beginning of a much larger journey. At this early stage, you may still believe that the entire experience is simply about the relationship itself. You might think the purpose of meeting this person is to build a romantic partnership. But as the journey unfolds, many people discover something unexpected. The connection was never just about the other person. It was about your transformation. Meeting your twin flame is often the first step in a much larger process. A process that can involve spiritual awakening, emotional healing, personal reinvention, and the discovery of your authentic life path. The encounter acts like a spark that ignites a chain reaction of inner changes. Changes that may eventually reshape your entire life. But at the moment of activation, you usually don't see the full picture yet. All you know is that something profound has happened.
You met someone.
And somehow that meeting opened a door inside your soul. A door you didn't even know existed. And once that door opens, it becomes very difficult to close it again. Because the journey has already begun. After the first encounter, something subtle but undeniable begins to unfold within you. At first, the change may feel almost invisible, like a quiet shift happening beneath the surface of your everyday life. You continue with your routines. You go to work, meet friends, complete tasks, and follow the same schedule you always have. But internally, something feels different. The world seems slightly more vivid. Your emotions feel stronger. Your thoughts begin moving in directions they never did before. And slowly, you start noticing that the meeting with this person did not simply leave an emotional impression. It triggered an awakening. This stage is often referred to as the beginning of spiritual activation. It doesn't always happen overnight. For some people, it unfolds gradually over weeks or months. For others, the awakening arrives suddenly, like a powerful realization that changes how they see everything. But one thing is common in almost every twin flame activation story. Once the awakening begins, your old way of perceiving life no longer feels sufficient. The questions that refuse to go away. One of the first signs of spiritual awakening is the appearance of questions you can't seem to
Ignore.
Before meeting your twin flame, you might have been comfortable with the structure of your life. You had goals. You had plans. You knew what success meant to you. But after the activation, those definitions begin to feel incomplete. You might find yourself lying awake at night asking questions such as, why am I really here? What is the purpose of my life? Why did meeting this person affect me so deeply? Is there something bigger guiding these events? These questions may seem philosophical at first, but over time, they become deeply personal. They begin to shape how you think about your choices, your relationships, and your future. Some people try to ignore these questions. They tell themselves they are overthinking. They try to return to their old routines. But the questions keep returning, again and again, until they can no longer be dismissed. This persistent curiosity is often the first doorway into spiritual awakening, the search for meaning. Once these questions take root, many people begin searching for answers in places they never explored before. You might suddenly feel drawn to subjects like meditation, energy healing,
Consciousness.
spiritual philosophy, ancient wisdom traditions, books about the nature of the soul. Even if you were previously skeptical about spirituality, something inside you now feels curious. You might start watching videos about spiritual awakening late at night. You might read articles about synchronicity, energy connections, or soul contracts. You might explore concepts like the law of attraction,
Karma.
higher consciousness, and sometimes you stumble upon a term that perfectly describes what you are experiencing: twin flame. When many people first encounter this concept, they feel a shock of recognition. They read about the intense connection, the emotional mirroring, the runner and chaser dynamic, the spiritual awakening that follows. And suddenly, the confusion begins to make sense. It feels as though someone has written a description of your personal experience. Synchronicities begin appearing. Another common aspect of twin flame activation is the appearance of synchronicities. Synchronicities are meaningful coincidences, events that seem too perfectly timed to be random. After meeting your twin flame, many people begin noticing patterns that feel almost impossible to ignore. For example, you might repeatedly see the same numbers on clocks: 11:11, 2:22, or 3:33. You might hear songs that remind you of them playing in unexpected places. You might think about them intensely, and moments later receive a message or see something connected to them. At first, you may try to explain these experiences logically. You might tell yourself you're simply paying more attention. But as the synchronicities continue, the pattern becomes difficult to dismiss. It begins to feel like the universe is communicating with you in subtle ways. These experiences often deepen your curiosity about the spiritual dimension of life. You begin wondering, is there an invisible structure behind reality? Are events in our lives guided by something greater than chance? Could meeting this person have been part of a larger design? Emotional sensitivity increases. Another major shift during activation is the increase in emotional awareness. Before the awakening, you may have been used to suppressing or ignoring certain feelings. You might have focused on productivity, responsibilities, and practical goals. But after activation, your emotional world begins expanding. You feel things more deeply. Music affects you more strongly. Conversations feel more meaningful. Moments of beauty, like sunsets, nature, or quiet reflections, start to carry emotional weight. At the same time, unresolved feelings that were buried in the past may begin surfacing. Old wounds, past heartbreaks, childhood memories, unprocessed grief. It can feel as if the meeting with your twin flame opened a door not only to love, but also to everything inside you that still needs healing. And while this emotional awakening can be uncomfortable, it also holds tremendous potential for transformation. Because healing begins with awareness, the illusion of control begins to break. Another important aspect of spiritual awakening is the gradual realization that life cannot always be controlled or predicted. Before activation, many people feel they have a clear plan for their future. They believe that if they work hard enough and make the right choices, everything will unfold according to their expectations. But the twin flame journey often challenges this belief. The connection itself may not follow a logical timeline. The relationship might face obstacles,
Distance.
timing issues, emotional triggers, unexpected separation. These challenges force you to confront a difficult truth. Life is not always something you can perfectly organize. Sometimes, the most transformative experiences arise from situations that feel chaotic or uncertain. This realization can feel frightening at first, but it also opens the door to a deeper understanding of life's mysterious nature. Awakening is not always comfortable. One of the biggest misconceptions about spiritual awakening is that it is always peaceful and uplifting. In reality, awakening often begins with disruption. The reason is simple. To awaken to a deeper truth, you must first recognize the limitations of your previous beliefs. This process can feel unsettling. You may question your identity, your goals, your relationships, even your understanding of reality itself. Some people describe this stage as feeling like they are waking up from a long dream. The world suddenly looks different. The things that once felt important may begin losing their meaning. And while this transformation can eventually lead to clarity and purpose, the early stages often feel confusing. The soul's invitation. Despite the challenges, the awakening that follows twin flame activation carries a powerful message. It is an invitation to explore who you truly are beyond the expectations of society. An invitation to heal the wounds that have shaped your life. An invitation to reconnect with the deeper essence of your soul. At first, you may not fully understand where this journey will lead. You may simply feel that something inside you has begun moving in a new direction. A quiet voice within you may whisper, "There is more to life than what you have known so far." And once that voice begins speaking, it becomes difficult to silence. Because the awakening has already begun. The meeting with your twin flame did not simply introduce a new person into your life. It activated a new level of consciousness within you. And as this awakening continues to unfold, the changes will not remain confined to your thoughts or emotions. They will soon begin transforming the outer structure of your life as well. Your priorities will shift. Your ambitions may change. And the path you once believed was certain may start leading somewhere entirely unexpected. At the beginning of the twin flame activation, the changes mostly happen inside you. Your thoughts shift. Your emotions deepen. Your awareness expands. But eventually something else begins to happen. The transformation starts moving outward. The life you once built, your routines, goals, relationships, and even your career begins to feel strangely unfamiliar. It's not that everything suddenly collapses overnight. Instead, it feels more like a quiet realization slowly growing stronger each day. The life you used to feel comfortable living no longer feels like your true life. And that realization can be both liberating and terrifying. The growing feeling of misalignment. One of the earliest signs of this stage is a persistent feeling of misalignment. You might wake up one morning and realize that the things that once motivated you no longer inspire. The same excitement. The job that once felt like an achievement now feels empty. The routines you used to follow automatically now feel mechanical. Even the conversations you have with certain people begin to feel different. You might find yourself thinking, "Why am I doing this every day? Is this really the path I meant to follow? Have I been living someone else's version of success?" Before your twin flame activation, you may have built your life according to expectations. Expectations from society. Expectations from family. Expectations from your past self. But awakening introduces a new perspective. Suddenly, you begin questioning whether those expectations ever truly reflected who you are at your core. The discomfort of awareness. Awareness is powerful, but it can also be uncomfortable. Because once you see that something in your life feels misaligned, it becomes difficult to ignore it. Before awakening, you may have been able to tolerate dissatisfaction by distracting yourself. Work harder. Stay busy. Focus on external achievements. But after activation, the inner voice becomes louder. You might feel restless in situations that once felt normal. Meetings at work feel draining. Certain social interactions feel superficial. Even familiar environments may start to feel emotionally heavy. It's as if your inner compass has recalibrated. Things that once seemed acceptable now feel deeply out of alignment with your authentic self. And while you may not yet know what direction you should move toward, you can clearly feel that the old direction is no longer right. Why twin flame activation triggers life changes. Many people wonder why meeting a twin flame seems to trigger such dramatic shifts in life. Circumstances. The reason lies in the nature of the connection itself. Twin flame energy often acts like a mirror. When you encounter your twin flame, the connection reflects your deepest truths back to you. Your desires, your fears, your hidden potential, your unresolved wounds. But perhaps most importantly, it reflects the difference between who you truly are and the life you are currently living. That reflection can be impossible to ignore. Suddenly, the gap between your authentic self and your current life becomes visible. And once you see that gap, something inside you begins pushing toward change. Not because you are trying to escape your life, but because your soul is trying to move closer to its natural expression. The career shift that many experience. One of the most common changes reported during twin flame activation is a shift in career or life direction. Before the awakening, many people pursue careers based primarily on stability or social expectations. They choose paths that seem practical, predictable, respectable. But after activation, those motivations often begin to lose their power. You may start asking deeper questions about your work. Does this job actually fulfill me? Am I contributing something meaningful to the world? If money were not the only factor, would I still choose this path? These questions can create intense internal conflict, because the logical part of your mind may resist change. You may have spent years building your current career. You may rely on it for financial stability. Walking away from that structure can feel frightening. And yet, the inner calling often continues growing stronger. Stories of unexpected transformation. Across many twin flame journeys, similar stories appear again and again. A corporate executive who spent years climbing the professional ladder suddenly realizes that their work feels empty. After their activation, they begin exploring meditation and eventually become a mindfulness teacher. A successful entrepreneur who once measured life through profit and growth starts feeling drawn toward humanitarian work and community projects. An office employee who felt invisible in their job discovers a passion for creativity, writing, or helping others heal. From the outside, these changes can look dramatic. Friends and family might say, "You're throwing away everything you worked for. Why would you leave a stable career? What happened to you?" But from the inside, the change often feels inevitable. Because once you awaken to your deeper truth, it becomes extremely difficult to continue living in a way that contradicts it. The fear of letting go. Despite the growing awareness, most people do not immediately change their lives. There is usually a period of hesitation. A period where two different forces pull in opposite directions. One voice says, "Stay where you are. It's safe. It's predictable." The other voice whispers, "There is something more waiting for you." This internal conflict can last months or even years. You might experiment with small changes first. Reading spiritual books, taking meditation classes, exploring creative passions, volunteering or helping others. These small steps often begin opening doors to entirely new possibilities. Gradually, the path ahead becomes clearer. But the transition still requires courage. Because leaving an old identity behind can feel like stepping into the unknown. When relationships begin to shift, career changes are not the only transformation that occurs during this stage. Relationships can also begin evolving. Some friendships may naturally fade, not because of conflict, but because your perspectives and priorities are changing. Conversations that once felt engaging may now feel disconnected. Meanwhile, you may begin attracting new people into your life, individuals who resonate with your evolving mindset, people interested in personal growth, spiritual exploration, authentic self-expression. These new connections often help support your transformation. They remind you that you are not alone in the process of awakening. The courage to follow the inner voice. At the heart of this stage lies one fundamental challenge: learning to trust the voice of your soul. This voice does not always speak in loud or dramatic ways. Sometimes it appears as a quiet sense of knowing, a gentle but persistent feeling that certain changes need to happen. Following that voice can feel risky, because it rarely guarantees immediate comfort or security. But over time, many people realize something important. Ignoring the voice creates a different kind of discomfort, a deeper dissatisfaction that grows stronger the longer it is ignored. Eventually, the question becomes impossible to avoid. Do I continue living the life I built? Or do I begin creating the life that truly reflects who I am? The beginning of a new direction. The transformation triggered by twin flame activation does not happen all at once. It unfolds gradually. One realization leads to another. One small change opens the door to the next. But the moment your old life begins to feel misaligned, the journey has already taken an important step forward. Because awareness is the beginning of all transformation. The meeting with your twin flame may have sparked the awakening. But the changes happening now are not only about that connection. They are about your evolution. Your soul is beginning to reshape your life so that it reflects your authentic truth. And while the path ahead may still be uncertain, one thing becomes increasingly clear. You are no longer the same person you were before that encounter. And the life that once felt permanent is slowly making space for a completely new chapter. At the beginning of the twin flame activation, the changes in your life may feel subtle, like small ripples spreading through your thoughts and emotions. But as time passes, those ripples begin turning into waves. What started as curiosity about life's deeper meaning slowly evolves into something much more powerful, a full spiritual awakening. You begin to notice that the world around you no longer looks the same. The way you perceive reality starts shifting. Your awareness expands. And experiences that once seemed ordinary now carry a deeper significance. For many people, this stage feels both fascinating and overwhelming, because it opens the door to aspects of consciousness that were previously hidden. Becoming aware of energy. One of the first changes many people report during this stage is an increased sensitivity to energy. Before activation, you may have thought of life primarily in physical terms. You focused on what you could see, touch, and measure. But after meeting your twin flame, something strange begins happening. You start sensing the emotional atmosphere in rooms more strongly. You may notice how certain environments make you feel calm, while others drain your energy. You might even begin to feel subtle energetic shifts when you interact with different people. For example, walking into a crowded room might suddenly feel overwhelming. Spending time in nature might feel deeply restorative. A short conversation with someone might leave you feeling either uplifted or strangely exhausted. These experiences often surprise people at first. They may wonder if they are imagining things. But over time, they begin realizing that their awareness of energy has simply become more refined. And this heightened sensitivity often marks a deeper stage of spiritual awakening. The mirror effect of the twin flame. Another reason the awakening intensifies is because of the mirror effect that exists between twin flames. A twin flame connection tends to reflect your inner world with remarkable clarity. Your strengths, your fears, your unresolved wounds, your hidden desires. When you interact with your twin flame, or even think about them, you may notice emotions surfacing that you didn't fully recognize before. Perhaps you feel an intense longing. Perhaps you experience deep joy when thinking about them. Or perhaps their presence triggers insecurities you didn't know you had. This mirroring can feel confusing. You may wonder why this person seems to affect your emotional state so strongly. But in many cases, the connection is simply illuminating aspects of yourself that were previously hidden beneath the surface. In other words, the twin flame acts as a catalyst for self-discovery, the expansion of intuition. As the awakening deepens, many people notice their intuition becoming stronger. Intuition is often described as an inner knowing that does not rely on logic or external proof. Before activation, you may have occasionally experienced intuitive feelings, but they were easy to dismiss. Now, those inner impressions become harder to ignore. You might suddenly feel a strong sense about a decision, You might sense that a certain opportunity is right for you, or that something doesn't feel aligned. Sometimes, you may even sense emotional shifts in people before they say anything. This doesn't mean you suddenly become psychic in a dramatic sense. Instead, your awareness becomes more attuned to subtle signals that were always present but previously unnoticed. And the more you listen to this inner guidance, the clearer it becomes. The appearance of synchronicities. During this stage, synchronicities often become more frequent. A synchronicity is a meaningful coincidence that seems to carry a deeper message or significance. For example, you might think about a specific idea and then encounter a book, video, or conversation about that exact topic later the same day. You might repeatedly see number patterns like 1111 or 222 on clocks, receipts, or license plates. You might hear songs or phrases that seem directly connected to your thoughts or emotional state. At first, these events may seem random, but when they occur repeatedly, many people begin feeling that life itself is responding to their awareness. It can feel as though the universe is subtly guiding you towards certain insights or realizations. These synchronicities often encourage people to pay closer attention to their inner experiences. They begin asking questions such as, is there a deeper intelligence shaping the flow of events in my life? Are these coincidences trying to show me something? The dark night of the soul. While spiritual awakening can bring moments of inspiration and clarity, it can also lead to a challenging phase known as the dark night of the soul. This stage occurs when the awakening forces you to confront unresolved emotional pain. Old wounds may resurface. Past memories may return with surprising intensity. You may become aware of patterns in your life that caused suffering but were previously ignored. For example, you might realize that you have been seeking validation from others for most of your life. You might recognize fears of abandonment rooted in childhood experiences. You might see how certain relationships repeated the same emotional dynamics. This process can feel deeply uncomfortable, because awakening doesn't just reveal beauty, it also reveals truth. And truth often requires facing aspects of ourselves we once tried to avoid. However, the purpose of this stage is not punishment. It is transformation. By becoming aware of these hidden wounds, you finally gain the opportunity to heal them. The desire for solitude. Another common shift during spiritual awakening is the growing need for solitude. Before activation, you may have enjoyed constant activity and social interaction. But as your awareness deepens, quiet moments become increasingly valuable. You may feel drawn to long walks alone, meditation or reflection, journaling, time spent in nature. These moments of solitude help you process the emotional and spiritual changes occurring within you. They create space for self-understanding, and they allow your intuition to speak more clearly without the distractions of daily noise. To others, this withdrawal might seem unusual. Friends may wonder why you are spending more time alone. But internally, this period often feels necessary. Because awakening is not just about discovering new ideas. It is about integrating those discoveries into your sense of identity. When the world feels both larger and stranger. As the awakening intensifies, many people describe a strange paradox. On one hand, life feels richer and more meaningful than before. You notice beauty in small details. You feel more connected to nature. You begin sensing that your life is part of a much larger story. But at the same time, the world may also feel unfamiliar. Things you once accepted without question now seem uncertain. Your understanding of reality itself begins expanding. This shift can feel disorienting, yet it also opens the door to profound growth. Because awakening invites you to explore life with curiosity rather than rigid certainty. The twin flame as the catalyst. During this stage, you may begin realizing something important about the twin flame connection. Although the encounter with your twin flame triggered the awakening, the journey is not only about that relationship. It is about your own spiritual evolution. Your twin flame acted like a key that unlocked a deeper level of awareness. They activated something within you that was always waiting to emerge. In many ways, the connection serves as a reminder of your true nature. It pushes you to grow beyond old limitations. It encourages you to discover your authentic self. And while the journey may include moments of confusion, pain, or uncertainty, it ultimately leads toward greater self-understanding. The awakening continues. By this point in the journey, one thing becomes clear. The person you were before meeting your twin flame is slowly transforming. Your perspective on life has changed. Your priorities are evolving. Your awareness of yourself and the world around you has expanded. And even though the path ahead may still feel uncertain, the awakening has already begun reshaping your identity. You are no longer living on autopilot. You are becoming conscious of your thoughts, emotions, and purpose. And as this awakening continues to unfold, the next stage of the journey will bring an even deeper challenge. Because soon, the transformation will begin moving beyond awareness and into healing. A healing process that asks you to confront the deepest layers of your past. And through that healing, you will begin discovering the strength and wisdom that have always existed within your soul. As the spiritual awakening deepens, something unexpected often begins to happen. The transformation is no longer just about curiosity, synchronicities, or emotional sensitivity. It starts reaching into the very core of who you believe you are. Many people on the twin flame journey describe this stage as one of the most confusing parts of the entire experience, because suddenly, you begin asking a question that can shake the foundation of your identity. Who am I really? Before meeting your twin flame, you likely had a fairly stable sense of self. You knew your role in the world. You knew what you valued. You knew what kind of future you were trying to build. Your identity might have been connected to things like your career, your achievements, your social status, your relationships, your beliefs about how life should work. These elements created a structure that helped you navigate the world. But once the twin flame activation sets deeper changes into motion, that structure begins to crack. And the person you once believed yourself to be starts to feel unfamiliar. When the old identity starts falling apart, one of the most disorienting aspects of this stage is the realization that many parts of your old identity were built on unconscious patterns. You may start noticing that some of your life choices were influenced by external expectations, rather than inner truth. Perhaps you pursued a certain career because it seemed respectable. Perhaps you stayed in certain relationships because they felt safe or socially acceptable. Perhaps you defined your worth through productivity, success, or validation from others. None of these choices were necessarily wrong. In fact, they may have helped you build stability and experience. But during the twin flame awakening, your consciousness begins expanding beyond those old definitions. You begin to see that your identity was shaped by layers of conditioning, family expectations, cultural norms, societal ideas about success. And when you start peeling away those layers, something strange happens. You realize that the person you thought you were may have only been a small part of your true self. The feeling of being lost. As the old identity begins dissolving, many people experience a period of deep uncertainty. You may wake up one day and realize that you are no longer sure what direction your life should
take.
Things that once felt certain now feel questionable. Goals you spent years pursuing suddenly seem less important. Dreams that once motivated you may lose their emotional power. This can create a strange emotional landscape. On one hand, you feel that something inside you is evolving. On the other hand, you may feel temporarily lost. Some people describe this stage as feeling like they are standing between two versions of themselves. The old self is fading. The new self has not fully emerged yet. And the space between those two identities can feel confusing. You might wonder, why do I feel so different from the person I used to be? Why do my priorities keep changing? Am I losing myself or discovering myself? The role of the twin flame mirror. During this identity crisis, the twin flame connection often continues acting as a powerful mirror. Interactions with your twin flame, or even memories of them, can trigger emotional reactions that reveal hidden parts of your psyche. For example, you might notice jealousy, fear, or insecurity appearing unexpectedly. You might feel intense vulnerability when thinking about them. Or you might experience moments of deep self-reflection about how you relate to love and connection. These emotional responses are not random. They often highlight patterns that have shaped your identity for years. Patterns related to self-worth, attachment, trust, abandonment. The twin flame mirror doesn't create these patterns, it simply reveals them. And once they become visible, you have the opportunity to examine them more honestly than ever before, questioning everything. Another characteristic of this stage is the urge to question almost everything you once believed. You might begin reevaluating your beliefs about relationships, about success, about happiness, about spirituality. Ideas that once felt unquestionable may now feel incomplete. For example, you might start realizing that external achievements do not necessarily create lasting fulfillment. You might begin understanding that emotional healing is just as important as professional success. You might see that authentic relationships require vulnerability rather than perfection. These realizations can feel both liberating and unsettling, because questioning old beliefs often means stepping outside the comfort of familiar narratives. Emotional highs and lows. The identity crisis stage often comes with fluctuating emotions. Some days, you may feel excited about your personal transformation. You might feel inspired by the idea that you are evolving into a more authentic version of yourself. Other days, you may feel overwhelmed by uncertainty. You might miss the clarity and simplicity of your old identity. You might wonder whether life would be easier if everything could return to the way it was before. These emotional swings are a natural part of transformation. When an identity dissolves, the mind tries to make sense of the changes. It tries to rebuild stability in a new form. But that reconstruction takes time. The fear of the unknown. One of the most challenging aspects of this stage is the fear that comes with stepping into unfamiliar territory. Your old identity may not have been perfect, but it was predictable. You knew how to operate within it. You knew how others perceived you. You knew what role you were playing in the world. But as that identity dissolves, the future becomes less defined. You may feel like you are navigating life without a clear map. And the human mind naturally resists uncertainty. It prefers familiar patterns, even if those patterns no longer align with your true self. This resistance can create moments where you feel tempted to return to your old identity, to ignore the changes, to suppress the awakening. But the deeper you move into this journey, the harder it becomes to pretend that nothing has changed. The hidden gift of the identity crisis. Although this stage can feel uncomfortable, it carries an important purpose. The identity crisis creates space for something new to emerge. When the old definitions of who you are begin dissolving, you gain the freedom to rediscover yourself. You're no longer limited by the labels you once accepted. You can begin exploring questions such as, what truly brings me joy? What kind of life feels authentic to my soul? What values do I genuinely want to live by? These questions mark the beginning of a deeper self-discovery process. Instead of defining yourself through external expectations, you begin building an identity based on inner truth, rebuilding from the inside out. Eventually, the identity crisis leads to a powerful realization. Your identity is not something fixed. It is something that can evolve. You are not limited to the version of yourself that existed before your awakening. You have the ability to grow beyond old patterns, to release beliefs that no longer serve you, to align your life more closely with your authentic nature. This realization marks the beginning of a new phase in the twin flame journey, a phase where healing becomes the central focus. Because once you begin rebuilding your identity from within, you naturally encounter the emotional wounds and past experiences that shaped your old self. And healing those wounds becomes the key to stepping fully into your new life. The turning point. Looking back, many people later recognize that this identity crisis was not a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. The moment when the illusion of a fixed identity began dissolving. The moment when the soul started reclaiming its voice. And although the process can feel disorienting while it unfolds, it ultimately leads towards something profoundly empowering. The discovery that you are not confined to the roles you once played. You are an evolving consciousness capable of transformation. And the person you are becoming may be far more authentic, compassionate, and aware than the person you used to be. But before that new version of yourself fully emerges, the journey will take you through another important phase. A phase that asks you to confront the deepest emotional wounds within you. Because true transformation does not only require awareness, it requires healing. After the identity crisis begins to unfold, another stage of the twin flame activation gradually emerges, one that many people describe as the most intense and transformative part of the entire journey. It is the stage where the focus shifts from awareness to healing. At first, spiritual awakening may feel exciting. New ideas, new insights, and a sense of discovery fill your mind. But eventually, the journey becomes more personal. It begins to touch the deeper emotional layers of your life. Because once you start questioning your identity and your past choices, you inevitably encounter something that has been quietly shaping your life for years. Unhealed emotional wounds. These wounds may have existed long before you met your twin flame. They may come from childhood experiences, past relationships, disappointments, or moments where you felt abandoned, rejected, or misunderstood. For a long time, you may have learned to live with these wounds without fully confronting them. But the twin flame activation changes that. It shines a light into places within you that were previously hidden. And once those places are illuminated, the healing process begins. Why the twin flame triggers healing. Many people wonder why meeting their twin flame seems to trigger such deep emotional reactions. Why does this connection bring up feelings that seem larger than the situation itself? The answer lies in the mirror effect of the twin flame dynamic. Twin flames tend to reflect each other's inner emotional landscape with extraordinary clarity. When you interact with your twin flame, or even think about them, you may suddenly become aware of emotional patterns that were previously unconscious. For example, you might notice a deep fear of abandonment. You might feel a strong need for reassurance or validation. You might recognize a pattern of sacrificing your own needs to maintain connection. These patterns are not created by the twin flame. They were already present within you, but the intensity of the connection acts like a mirror, revealing them more clearly than any previous relationship ever did. In this sense, the twin flame journey becomes an invitation to face the parts of yourself that still need healing. The return of old memories. As the healing process begins, memories from the past often resurface. Experiences you thought you had already moved beyond may suddenly return to your awareness. Childhood moments where you felt unseen. Past relationships where you experienced betrayal or rejection. Situations where you suppressed your emotions in order to protect yourself. At first, this resurgence of memories can feel overwhelming. You might wonder why events from years ago are suddenly appearing in your thoughts again. But these memories often surface for a reason. They represent emotional patterns that have not yet been fully processed. The twin flame activation simply creates the conditions where those patterns can finally be
Addressed.
understanding the inner child. One concept that frequently becomes important during this stage is the idea of the inner child. The inner child represents the emotional part of us that formed during early life experiences. When we were young, we learned how to interpret love, safety, and belonging based on how the people around us treated us. If those experiences included moments of emotional pain or neglect, the inner child may carry those wounds into adulthood. Even if we appear confident and successful on the surface, those early emotional patterns can still influence our reactions. For example, someone who experienced abandonment in childhood may develop a strong fear of losing loved ones. Later in life, someone who felt criticized or rejected may struggle with feelings of inadequacy. Someone who had to suppress emotions in order to survive may find vulnerability difficult. During the twin flame healing stage, these inner child wounds often come into focus. And while this process can be challenging, it also offers a powerful opportunity. Because once these wounds are recognized, they can finally begin to heal. The courage to feel. Healing requires something that many people have spent years avoiding. It requires the courage to feel. In modern life, we are often encouraged to move quickly past emotional pain. We distract ourselves with work, entertainment, or productivity. We tell ourselves to stay strong and keep moving forward. But true healing does not happen through avoidance. It happens through awareness and compassion. When an old wound surfaces, the goal is not to push it away. Instead, the healing process invites you to sit with the emotion, to acknowledge the pain, to understand where it came from, and to offer yourself the understanding that may have been missing in the past. This process can feel uncomfortable at first, but over time, it becomes deeply empowering, because every wound you face with compassion loses some of its power over you. Letting go of old narratives. Another important part of healing involves releasing the stories you have been telling yourself about your past. Many emotional wounds become reinforced by the narratives we attach to them. For example, someone who experienced rejection might unconsciously develop the belief, "I am not good enough." Someone who was abandoned might develop the belief, "People always leave." These beliefs can quietly shape behavior for years. They influence the relationships we choose. They affect the opportunities we pursue. They shape the way we see ourselves. During the healing stage of the twin flame journey, these narratives begin to surface. And once they become visible, you have the opportunity to question them. Are these beliefs truly accurate? Or were they formed during moments when you lacked the perspective and support to see the full picture? Releasing these old narratives is not always easy, but it opens the door to a more compassionate understanding of yourself. Self-love as the foundation of healing. One of the most important lessons that emerges during this stage is the concept of self-love. Before the twin flame journey, many people unconsciously search for validation from external sources. They seek approval from partners, friends, family, or professional achievements. But the healing process gradually reveals that true stability must come from within. Self-love does not mean believing you are perfect. It means accepting your humanity, your strengths, your imperfections, your past experiences, and treating yourself with the same compassion you would offer someone you deeply care about. When self-love begins developing, something remarkable happens. The emotional triggers that once caused intense reactions start losing their power, because your sense of worth is no longer dependent on external validation. The transformation begins. Although the healing stage can feel intense, it also marks one of the most powerful turning points in the twin flame journey, because every emotional wound you heal brings you closer to your authentic self. The fears that once controlled your reactions begin dissolving. The patterns that once repeated in your relationships begin changing. And the person you are becoming starts to feel more grounded, more aware, and more emotionally free. You may begin noticing subtle changes in how you respond to situations. You react with more patience. You understand your emotions more clearly. You approach relationships with greater honesty. These changes may seem small at first, but over time, they reshape the way you experience life, preparing for the next stage. As healing continues, another realization slowly emerges. The twin flame journey was never only about meeting another person. It was about becoming the version of yourself capable of experiencing love in its most authentic
Form.
And that transformation requires more than awareness. It requires growth. It requires courage. It requires healing. By facing your wounds, you are not only releasing the pain of the past, you are creating space for a new future. A future where your identity is no longer shaped by fear or old emotional patterns. A future where your life aligns more closely with your true purpose. And as this healing process unfolds, the next stage of the journey begins revealing itself. A stage where your external life, your work, your passions, and your contributions to the world begins transforming in ways you may never have imagined. As the healing process begins to reshape your inner world, another powerful transformation starts to unfold, one that reaches far beyond emotions and personal awareness. It begins affecting the direction of your life itself. Many people who go through twin flame activation eventually notice a profound change in how they view their purpose. The goals that once seemed central to their identity may start losing their importance. At the same time, new interests, passions, and desires begin emerging, sometimes in ways that feel completely unexpected. It can feel as if your soul is quietly guiding you toward a different path, a path that aligns more closely with who you truly are, when success no longer feels the same. Before the twin flame activation, many people define success through external achievements, career advancement, financial stability, recognition, social status. These goals often provide motivation and direction for years. They create a sense of progress and accomplishment. But after the awakening and healing stages, something begins to shift. You may suddenly realize that these achievements, while valuable, do not fully satisfy the deeper part of your being. You might reach a milestone you once dreamed of, and instead of feeling fulfilled, you feel strangely empty. Or you might look at your daily routine and ask yourself, is this really the life I want to spend the next decades living? This realization can be unsettling, because the structure you once relied on to measure success no longer feels complete. But this shift is also an important step in discovering a more authentic life direction, the emergence of a deeper calling. As old definitions of success begin fading, a new kind of motivation often appears. It may start as a quiet curiosity, a sense of interest in activities that feel meaningful beyond financial or social reward. For example, you might begin feeling drawn to helping others through emotional support or mentorship, exploring creative expression through writing, art, or music, studying spiritual or psychological subjects, participating in community or humanitarian work, teaching, guiding, or sharing knowledge. These interests may not always make logical sense at first. They might not seem as practical as your previous career goals, but they often carry something that was missing before, a sense of purpose. When you engage with these new passions, you may notice a different type of energy within yourself. You feel more alive, more connected, more aligned with your inner values. The role of the twin flame catalyst. It is common for people to wonder why meeting their twin flame seems to trigger such dramatic changes in life direction. Why does this connection often lead to questioning long-established plans? The answer lies in the nature of the twin flame dynamic. The connection activates deeper levels of self-awareness. It encourages you to look beyond surface-level definitions of success and explore the deeper meaning of your existence. In many ways, the twin flame journey acts as a catalyst for soul alignment. It pushes you to examine whether your life reflects your true values. If there is a gap between your authentic self and the life you are living, the journey often brings that gap into focus. And once you become aware of it, change becomes inevitable. The courage to redefine your path, realizing that your life purpose may be shifting, is one thing. Acting on that realization is another. For many people, this stage involves difficult decisions. You may begin questioning your career, your long-term plans, the direction you once believed your life would follow. And making changes in these areas can feel intimidating. You might worry about financial stability. You might fear disappointing family members or friends who supported your previous path. You might wonder whether pursuing a new direction is realistic. These concerns are natural. Changing your life direction requires courage. But many people on the twin flame journey eventually realize something important. Ignoring the call to alignment often creates deeper dissatisfaction than the uncertainty of change. Gradual transformation rather than sudden change. It is important to understand that this transformation does not always require drastic decisions. Overnight, some people do make bold changes, leaving careers, relocating, or pursuing entirely new fields. But for many others, the shift happens gradually. They begin exploring new passions alongside their current responsibilities. They take classes. They read books. They connect with communities that share their interests. Over time, these small steps begin forming a new path. The process can feel organic. One opportunity leads to another. One discovery opens the door to the next. Eventually, the new direction becomes clear enough that larger changes feel less frightening. discovering meaning in service. Another common theme that emerges during this stage is the desire to contribute to the well-being of others. After experiencing personal awakening and healing, many people feel naturally drawn to supporting others on their journeys. This does not always mean becoming a spiritual teacher or healer. It can take many forms, offering emotional support to friends and family, creating art that inspires reflection, sharing knowledge that helps people grow, participating in projects that improve communities. The specific form of service may vary, but the underlying motivation often feels similar. You begin recognizing that your life has the potential to impact others in meaningful ways, and contributing to that impact becomes a source of fulfillment, the transformation of motivation. As your sense of purpose evolves, your motivation begins shifting as well. Before awakening, motivation may have been driven by external rewards, recognition, approval, material success. But after the inner transformation, motivation often becomes more intrinsic. You pursue activities because they feel meaningful, because they align with your values, because they allow you to express your authentic self. This change in motivation can feel deeply liberating. You are no longer chasing achievements simply to prove something to the world. Instead, you are building a life that reflects your inner truth, trusting the process. One of the most challenging aspects of this stage is learning to trust the unfolding of your path. The mind often seeks certainty. It wants a clear plan, a predictable outcome. But the journey of purpose discovery rarely follows a straight line. There may be moments of doubt, moments where progress feels slow, moments where you question whether you are moving in the right direction. Yet many people later realize that these uncertainties were part of the process. Each experience contributed to their understanding. Each step revealed another piece of the puzzle. Over time, what once felt confusing begins forming a coherent story, a life aligned with the soul. Eventually, the shift in purpose leads to a profound realization. Your life does not need to be defined by expectations you inherited from the past. You have the ability to shape a path that reflects your deepest values and passions. This realization marks a significant milestone in the twin flame activation journey, because it shows that the transformation triggered by the connection is not only emotional or spiritual, it is also practical. It changes how you live, how you work, how you interact with the world. And although the path ahead may still contain challenges, one thing becomes clear. You are no longer living solely according to external definitions of success. You are beginning to create a life aligned with your soul. And as this alignment deepens, the next stage of the journey will reveal another surprising truth about the twin flame connection. A truth that many people only begin to understand after significant personal growth has already taken place. By the time the twin flame activation has awakened your awareness, shaken your identity, and started guiding you toward healing and purpose, another stage often begins to unfold, one that can feel deeply confusing and emotionally intense. This stage is known by many people on the twin flame journey as the runner-chaser dynamic. It is one of the most widely discussed aspects of the twin flame experience, yet it is also one of the most misunderstood. Because on the surface, it can look like a simple relationship problem. One person pulls away, the other person tries to hold on. But beneath that surface behavior lies a much deeper spiritual process. The runner-chaser dynamic is not simply about separation. It is about growth, reflection, and transformation. Why one twin becomes the runner. In many twin flame journeys, one person begins to withdraw from the connection. They may become distant. They may avoid emotional conversations. They may even disappear from the relationship entirely. This person is often referred to as the runner. From the outside, their behavior can seem confusing or even hurtful. Why would someone run away from a connection that feels so powerful? The answer often lies in the intensity of the twin flame mirror. The connection reflects deep emotional truths. It exposes vulnerabilities. It challenges long-held beliefs about love, trust, and identity. For someone who is not yet ready to face these internal changes, the experience can feel overwhelming. Running away becomes a way to regain control, a way to escape the emotional intensity that the connection brings.
It is not always a conscious decision.
Many runners simply feel an instinctive urge to create distance, even if they cannot fully explain why. The role of the chaser. While one twin moves away, the other often reacts in the opposite way. They feel a strong desire to maintain the connection. They may reach out repeatedly. They may try to understand what went wrong. They may search for ways to repair the relationship. This person is often referred to as the chaser. The chaser experiences the separation very differently from the runner. For them, the connection feels deeply meaningful and difficult to replace. They may feel as though something important has been taken away. And because the twin flame activation has already opened their emotional awareness, the separation can feel extremely painful. The chaser may spend long periods trying to understand the situation. Why did the runner leave? What could be done differently? Is there a way to bring the connection back? These questions can dominate the chaser's thoughts for a long time. The hidden purpose behind the dynamic. Although the runner-chaser dynamic can feel painful, it often serves a deeper purpose within the twin flame journey. It reveals emotional patterns that both individuals must address in order to grow. For the runner, the challenge often involves learning to face emotional vulnerability. They may need to confront fears of intimacy, commitment, or loss of independence. For the chaser, the challenge often involves learning to develop self-worth and emotional independence. They may need to release the idea that their happiness depends on the presence of another person. In other words, the dynamic pushes both individuals toward personal evolution. The runner must eventually learn to stop avoiding emotional truth. The chaser must learn to stop seeking external validation. When both people grow through these lessons, the dynamic begins transforming. The pain of separation. During the early stages of the runner-chaser dynamic, the separation can feel extremely difficult. The chaser may feel a deep sense of loss. Because the connection felt so meaningful, its absence can create a strong emotional void. Some people describe this period as feeling like their life suddenly lost its direction. They may struggle to focus on daily activities. They may replay memories of the relationship repeatedly. They may wonder if they will ever experience that level of connection again. These feelings are not signs of weakness. They are part of the emotional intensity created by the twin flame activation. But over time, something important begins to shift. The turning point for the chaser. Eventually, many chasers reach a moment of realization. They begin understanding that constantly pursuing the runner is not bringing peace or healing. They recognize that their energy has been focused almost entirely on the other person. And slowly, they start redirecting that energy back toward themselves. This shift is often described as the moment when the chaser stops chasing. Instead of seeking answers from the runner, they begin focusing on their own growth. They invest time in healing emotional wounds. They pursue personal passions and life goals. They rebuild their sense of identity independent of the relationship. At first, this shift may feel difficult, because letting go of the pursuit can feel like giving up something important. But over time, the chaser often discovers an unexpected sense of freedom. They begin realizing that their life has meaning beyond the connection. And that realization changes everything. What happens to the runner? Interestingly, when the chaser stops chasing, the energetic dynamic often begins shifting. The runner, who once felt the need to escape the intensity of the connection, may start experiencing a different emotional response. Without the pressure of pursuit, they may begin reflecting more deeply on the relationship. They may remember the connection more clearly. They may feel curiosity about what the chaser is doing now. In some cases, they begin reaching out again, not because they were forced to return, but because they have had the space to process their own emotions. This stage can create a surprising reversal of roles. The person who once ran away may now feel drawn back toward the connection. The lesson of self-empowerment. The runner-chaser dynamic ultimately teaches one of the most important lessons of the twin flame
Journey.
It shows that love cannot be forced. True connection emerges naturally when both individuals are aligned with their authentic selves. Chasing someone out of fear or desperation rarely creates harmony. But focusing on personal growth and emotional healing often transforms the energy of the relationship. This is why many spiritual teachers emphasize that the twin flame journey is not primarily about reunion. It is about self-realization. The connection acts as a catalyst for growth. But the real transformation happens within each individual, beyond the dynamic. As both twins continue evolving, the runner-chaser dynamic gradually loses its power. The intense emotional reactions begin calming. Both individuals become more aware of their own patterns and triggers. Instead of reacting from fear or attachment, they start responding with greater clarity and self-respect. At this point, the connection itself may also begin transforming. Whether the twins reconnect or continue their journeys separately, the relationship no longer feels defined by emotional imbalance. It becomes part of a larger process of spiritual development, the deeper meaning. Looking back, many people later realize that the runner-chaser stage was not a failure. It was a test of emotional maturity, a test of self-worth, a test of whether love could evolve beyond attachment and fear. And although the experience can be painful while it unfolds, it often becomes one of the most powerful turning points in the twin flame journey, because it forces both individuals to grow in ways they may never have imagined before meeting each other. And through that growth, they begin moving closer to a deeper understanding of themselves, their purpose, and the true nature of love. The journey that began with a single meeting continues unfolding. And as the lessons of the runner-chaser dynamic integrate into your life, another realization begins emerging. The twin flame activation was never just about the relationship. It was about awakening the most authentic version of yourself. There is a moment in every twin flame activation journey when a strange realization quietly settles into the soul. You cannot go back. You may try to return to your old life. You may attempt to think the way you used to think, believe the things you used to believe, or follow the same path you once followed. But something fundamental inside you has already shifted. And once that shift happens, there is no undoing it. Meeting your twin flame does not simply introduce a person into your life. It introduces a level of awareness that permanently changes how you see reality, relationships, purpose, and yourself. It is not just a relationship. It is an awakening. The life you once knew. Before the activation, most people live within a predictable framework. They build a life based on expectations.
Get a stable job.
Find a partner. Build a family. Accumulate success. Follow society's timeline. From the outside, everything may look perfectly fine. You might have had a good career. You might have been in relationships that seemed normal. You might have believed you understood who you were and where your life was going. But after encountering your twin flame, something starts to feel incomplete. Not because your life was wrong, but because your soul has begun remembering something deeper. Suddenly, the goals that once motivated you may feel empty. The career that once excited you may feel misaligned. The life you built may begin to feel like a costume rather than an authentic expression of your
Soul.
And this realization can be both terrifying and liberating. When the old identity begins to crack, twin flame activation often triggers what many spiritual teachers call an identity collapse. The version of yourself you believed in starts to fall apart. The personality you created to survive, succeed, and fit into the world begins to reveal its cracks. You start asking questions you never asked before. Who am I really? What is my true purpose? Why does my life suddenly feel so different? This stage can feel confusing because nothing external may have changed yet. You might still be living in the same house, working the same job, talking to the same people. But internally, the ground beneath you has shifted. You are no longer the same person. The example of Daniel. Consider Daniel. Daniel was a corporate strategist working for a major consulting firm. He had spent nearly a decade climbing the ladder of professional success. His life was structured, organized, and predictable. Then he met someone during a leadership seminar. At first, it seemed like an ordinary conversation. But something about that moment felt unusually powerful. Their eye contact lasted longer than normal. Their conversation flowed effortlessly. And when they shook hands goodbye, Daniel felt a strange sensation he couldn't explain, almost like a quiet electric pulse running through his chest. He tried to ignore it. But after that meeting, something inside him started changing. Within weeks, Daniel began questioning everything. Why did his career suddenly feel meaningless? Why did he feel drawn toward things he had never considered before? Meditation, spirituality, creative expression? Why did the memory of that one conversation keep returning to him in dreams? He hadn't even started a relationship with that person. Yet their presence had activated something profound within him. This is how twin flame activation often begins. Not with dramatic romance, but with an energetic awakening.
The soul begins to speak.
One of the most powerful aspects of twin flame activation is that it reconnects you with your inner
voice.
For many people, this voice has been buried for years. Society teaches us to prioritize logic, productivity, and external validation. But the soul communicates through intuition, emotion, and subtle knowing. When you encounter your twin flame, that inner voice often becomes impossible to ignore. You begin noticing signs. Synchronicities appear more frequently. You feel guided toward certain decisions without fully understanding why. Sometimes it feels like life itself is gently pushing you toward a new direction. Other times, it feels like the universe is shaking your entire foundation to wake you up. And this can be uncomfortable, because awakening often requires letting go. Letting go of what no longer fits. Once the activation begins, many people experience significant life changes. Some leave careers that no longer align with their soul. Some move to new cities. Some end relationships that were built on comfort rather than truth. These changes are not always easy. In fact, they can be deeply painful. Friends may not understand your transformation. Family members may question your decisions. You may even doubt yourself. But deep down, something inside you knows that the old life no longer fits. It is like trying to wear clothing that once fit perfectly, but now feels too small. The soul is expanding. And expansion requires space. Why this awakening feels so intense. Many people wonder why meeting a twin flame can trigger such dramatic internal change. The reason lies in the nature of the connection itself. A twin flame connection acts like a mirror, not just reflecting your personality, but reflecting your soul. When you encounter someone who mirrors your deepest truth, it becomes impossible to continue living inauthentically. Illusions begin to dissolve. Pretenses begin to fall away. The life you built based on external expectations begins to transform into a life guided by inner
truth.
This process can feel chaotic, but chaos often precedes transformation, the moment of realization. At some point during the activation journey, a quiet realization emerges. You begin to understand that meeting this person was not random. It was a catalyst. Their role in your life was never simply about romance. It was about awakening your soul, and whether they remain physically in your life or not. The transformation they triggered continues unfolding. This is why many people say that the twin flame journey changes them forever. Not because the relationship lasts forever, but because the awakening does. A question worth asking. So let me ask you something. Think back to the moment you first met the person who changed everything. Did something inside you awaken that day? Did your life begin shifting in ways you could never have predicted? Did you start questioning paths you once believed were certain? If so, you may already be experiencing the deeper layers of twin flame activation. And if that is true, then your journey is not just about another person. It is about discovering the truest version of yourself. The awakening continues. But here is the truth that many people do not realize. Activation is not the end of the journey. It is only the beginning. Because once your soul awakens, it begins guiding you towards something even greater. Your purpose, your healing, your transformation. And the next stage of the twin flame journey reveals exactly how that transformation unfolds. Because awakening may open the door, But the real journey begins when you step through it. When people first hear about twin flames, they often imagine a magical love story. They imagine two souls recognizing each other, falling deeply in love, and living happily ever after. But what many people do not realize is that the true purpose of the twin flame connection is not simply romance. It is transformation. Meeting your twin flame does not just awaken love. It awakens everything inside you that has been buried, ignored, or avoided. Your fears, your wounds, your insecurities, your unresolved emotional patterns. And this is where the real journey begins. Because once the activation happens, the soul begins asking you a powerful question. Are you ready to heal? Why the twin flame connection triggers healing. One of the most mysterious aspects of the twin flame journey is how quickly it exposes emotional
wounds.
People often describe the connection as incredibly intense. At first, it may feel like a dream. The attraction is powerful. The emotional bond feels instant. You may feel deeply understood in ways you never experienced before. But soon after this initial harmony, something unexpected happens. Old pain begins to surface. You might notice feelings of abandonment, jealousy, fear of rejection, or deep insecurity emerging within you. This can be confusing. You may wonder, why would meeting someone who feels so spiritually connected trigger so much emotional chaos? The answer lies in the mirroring nature of the twin flame connection. Your twin flame reflects not only your light, they also reflect the parts of you that are still wounded. The mirror you cannot escape. In everyday relationships, it is easy to hide certain parts of ourselves. We can suppress emotions. We can avoid difficult conversations. We can maintain a version of ourselves that feels safe and controlled. But the twin flame connection rarely allows this, because the energy between you acts like a mirror. If you carry a fear of abandonment, the connection may trigger situations where that fear surfaces. If you struggle with self-worth, the connection may reveal how deeply that wound runs. If you have unresolved trauma, it may suddenly become impossible to ignore. At first, this can feel overwhelming. But in reality, this process is part of the deeper purpose of the connection. The twin flame journey pushes you to face what your soul has been trying to heal all along. The story of Elena. Take the story of Elena. For most of her life, Elena believed she was emotionally independent. She had built a successful career, maintained friendships, and felt confident in her ability to navigate life on her own. Then she met someone at a small art exhibition. Their connection was immediate. They could talk for hours. Their personalities seemed to complement each other perfectly. But within months, Elena noticed something she had never experienced before. She began feeling an intense fear whenever the other person pulled away emotionally. Even small moments of distance triggered anxiety she couldn't explain. At first, she blamed the relationship. She thought the connection itself was unstable. But as she reflected deeper, she realized something important. The connection had not created her fear. It had revealed it. The fear had been buried inside her since childhood. Years earlier, Elena had experienced emotional abandonment in her family. But she had learned to suppress those feelings by focusing on independence and achievement. Meeting her twin flame activated those hidden wounds. Not to hurt her, but to bring them into the light so they could finally heal. Healing is not always comfortable. One of the biggest misconceptions about spiritual awakening is that it always feels peaceful. In reality, healing can be deeply uncomfortable. When old wounds surface, they bring emotions that may have been suppressed for years. Sadness, anger, loneliness,
fear.
These emotions are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are signs that something inside you is finally being acknowledged. The twin flame journey often forces people to confront emotional truths they avoided for most of their lives. And while this process can feel painful, it also opens the door to profound transformation. Because once a wound is recognized, it can finally begin to heal. The separation phase and inner work. For many people, the healing journey becomes most intense during periods of separation. The separation phase is one of the most misunderstood parts of the twin flame experience. From the outside, it may look like a breakup or distance between two people. But energetically, something deeper is happening. Separation often forces both individuals to turn inward. Without the distraction of the connection itself, you are left alone with your thoughts, emotions, and inner patterns. And this is where real healing takes place. People begin exploring practices they may never have considered before. Meditation, therapy, energy work, journaling, shadow work, spiritual study. The goal is not to chase the other person. The goal is to evolve. Because the more you heal within yourself, the more balanced your energy becomes. Transformation of identity. One of the most powerful results of this healing journey is the transformation of identity. You may notice that the person you were before twin flame activation slowly disappears. Old habits fade away. Your priorities shift. Your perspective on relationships changes. Things that once felt important may no longer matter. And things you once ignored may suddenly feel essential. You begin seeking authenticity rather than approval. You begin prioritizing inner peace over external validation. You begin listening to your intuition instead of following social expectations. In many ways, you become a completely new version of yourself. Not because someone changed you, but because the connection awakened the truth that was always within you. A journey back to the self. This is one of the deepest realizations of the twin flame path. The journey is not only about union with another person. It is also about union with yourself. Before the activation, many people live disconnected from their true nature. They adapt to expectations. They suppress emotions. They chase external success while ignoring internal fulfillment. But the twin flame journey slowly dismantles those patterns. It guides you back toward your authentic self. And this process is incredibly empowering. Because when you reconnect with your true self, you no longer depend on external validation to feel whole. You begin to realize that the love you were searching for externally has always existed within you. The real purpose of the connection. At this stage of the journey, many people begin to understand something profound. The twin flame connection was never meant to simply complete you. It was meant to awaken you. It was meant to push you toward growth, healing, and self-discovery. Whether union happens or not, the transformation you experience becomes the real gift. You become more conscious, more emotionally aware, more connected to your purpose, more aligned with your soul. And in that sense, the journey succeeds regardless of the outcome of the relationship itself. If you are watching this right now, take a moment to reflect. Since meeting this person who changed your life, have you started questioning your old patterns? Have you begun healing emotional wounds you once ignored? Have your goals, beliefs, or priorities started shifting? If the answer is yes, then something powerful is already happening within you. You are not simply experiencing a relationship. You are experiencing a transformation. The message of the journey. The twin flame path is not always easy. It can challenge you. It can push you beyond your comfort zone. It can force you to confront parts of yourself you never expected to face. But within that challenge lies incredible growth. Because every step of healing brings you closer to your true self. And when you finally reconnect with that truth, something beautiful happens. You no longer search for love. You become it. Meeting your twin flame may feel like the most mysterious event of your life. But perhaps the real mystery is not the other person. Perhaps the real mystery is the version of yourself that is waiting to awaken. And if this journey has already begun for you, remember this. You were never meant to stay the same. You were meant to transform. If this video resonated with your experience, share your story in the comments. Your journey might help someone else understand their own awakening. And if you want to explore more about twin flame activation, spiritual awakening, and the deeper meaning behind these connections, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join this growing community. Because sometimes, the moment that changes your life forever is only the beginning of discovering who you truly are.
Thank you for spending this moment with me. If this message resonated with your soul, remember to subscribe and continue this journey with us here on Twin Flame Journey. And always remember, what is meant for your soul will always find its way back to you. Until next time, beautiful soul, trust the journey.